once we understand the illness, we can actually find a cure. We can pursue a cure. Is it simply a product of trusting in ourselves and in others, that reciprocity, that planting good seeds and expecting good things as opposed to the other way around? Is it really that simple? If we have diagnosed the illness and you're saying that now we can sort of treat it, do you align with my belief of like, look, this never goes away. This is so hardwired into us. And yet, if we can actually acknowledge that we can't escape it, let's just get really freaking good at recognizing it in ourselves and others such that we can call it out. And that's where awareness or our ability to direct our attention matters most.
I think that's exactly the way that I try to get people to think. There's a mindset that I suggest in the book, which is hopeful skepticism, right? And the idea here is that we are in no way suggesting replacing cynicism, mistrust, and safetyism, right? Psychological safetyism, almost the fetishizing of being safe as the most important quality of our mental lives. We're not suggesting to replace that with the opposite, which would be unthinking, naive trust of everybody, being gullible and turning into a chump and a rube and being taken advantage of and being totally unsafe all the time. That would be ridiculous, right? I think, Chase, it sounds like both you and I are advocating for a middle ground, right? And from my perspective, in the world of cynicism and hope, the middle ground is not to naively think that everything is awesome. Of course not. You know, there's this famous modern cartoon of a dog sitting in a room that's on fire, saying, "This is fine." We're not trying to be the dog saying this is fine. This is not fine. There are so many things that are not fine in our world. And if you don't feel fine, that is 100% understandable. The question is, where do we go from here? And I think that just as unthinkingly, naively trusting people is a terrible mistake, so is unthinkingly and naively mistrusting people, right? There are all sorts of problems in our world, but the minute that we decide we are the problem, our species is a write-off, well, then there's no place to go. There's nothing to be done, and there's nothing that we can do as individuals either. Instead, skepticism, again, is this openness to evidence. And the reason that I think of hopeful skepticism as important is because negativity bias, right, our tendency to focus on the worst aspects of our lives and other people, means that our default, if we're skeptical, is to pick up evidence in a little bit of a biased way, right? If you're a skeptic, you're trying to take in evidence about the world. You're trying to integrate it so you can be fluid, right? So that you can return after a good experience or a bad experience to an open and inquisitive mind and adapt as well as you can. And a skeptic should adapt. If they're at a poker table, they should not trust the people around them. That would be ridiculous. If they're with their family and their family has a history of having affectionate and supportive bonds, they should absolutely trust the people in that room. And then they should, in other rooms, look to see, well, which type of room am I in? What type of relationship is this? They should adapt. Now, being a skeptic in view of the tens of thousands of years, millions of years of evolution that we're working with, means that we're going to pick up negative information more than positive, which sounds terrible. As you were saying, it sounds a little bit depressing, but there's great news underneath that bad news, which is that if you pay closer attention, if you take a more mindful look at the evidence and at the people around you, a lot of them are probably better than you think, right? I mean, the average person underestimates the average person. And by this, I do not mean that there aren't cheaters and scoundrels and people hurting each other all over the world. But in study after study, over decades of science now, people don't realize how trustworthy, generous, open-minded, warm, and supportive other people are. And what that means is that when we adopt hopeful skepticism, we can understand as we pay attention to the world that our defaults are a little bit negative and hold that hope that probably things are better than we think.